Welcome to Mavs Center Court, presented by Legacy Precious Metals. A beautiful Saturday night in downtown Dallas. The weather warm, the lights bright. The only thing missing was a winning night for the Dallas Mavericks. Milwaukee led by a pair of superstars, Giannis and Lillard, and their three-point assassin off the bench, Jason Kidd, Giannis's former coach, and the Dallas Mavericks a loss. 132-117 is the final, and that brings an end to the 4-game home winning streak for the Mavs. Dana Larson along with Jeff Skinwade and Brian Damaris here, and such an encouraging start to this game, Brian, and in the blink of an eye, the entire complexion of the game changed, and it was a knockout punch. This very short-handed Mavericks team was not equipped to come back from.
Well, we talked about three-pointers and the need to make them and prevent them. And early on, Milwaukee wasn't hitting theirs. We were. And then everything switched. And so when you were doubling Giannis, he was finding the open player. The ball was moving and the threes were falling. So what do? You single him. Well, when you single him, he gets a barrel of steam and he goes right to the rim and gets where he wants. So whatever poison you wanted to pick, you weren't going to be able to get anything. And then, on the other side, you had to get, your shots, and your three stopped falling. And why did it stop falling? Because they're playing with two bigs, Giannis and Lopez. When you drag one out, there's one underneath. You weren't able to get anything inside, and you have to get inside to get those looks from outside to be open. And those contested looks stopped falling, and it just started feeding on itself.
Yeah, they struggled. They had to go in early, and then it reversed.
No doubt about that. And we have to look at the two Milwaukee superstars, who really, end up with the big nights. And, you just mentioned how good Giannis was in this game, and Dame Lillard, and you worry about how you game plan against these two, both so good at what they've done for so many years. And, Giannis with the 29, getting to the free throw line all night long. And for a free throw shooter who's not all that excellent all the time, Skid, was really good in that regard tonight.
Yeah, So it was one of these games where, look, we talked about this in the pregame show. When the Mavericks had their nice stretch before the All-Star break, they were making their threes. They're compromised right now with injury, and so they're going to have to keep up with teams offensively. And they did that in the first half. I think, honestly, we talked about this on the broadcast. Milwaukee's early three trouble, those shots were going in and out. And you knew at some point that was going to change, and it did change. And when it changed, the Mavericks couldn't keep up with it. There was a stretch at the end of the second where there was a scoring flurry for Milwaukee. They carried that into the second half, and then the first few possessions of the third quarter were really rough on the Mavericks. They never got it back, and then you're playing uphill. And when you're playing uphill and you're shorthanded, it is so difficult. Everything's got to go your way. And I think we're starting to see now in these last stretch of games since the All-Star break, we're starting to see the injuries catch up to them, and they have to play almost flawless basketball to hang with teams that are playing well offensively.
Yeah, and look, you saw why Milwaukee made the trade they did at the beginning of last year for Damian Lillard. Before this, they were a defensive-minded team. It was Giannis basically trying to carry everything in the fourth quarter. Things would slow down. Now, with Lillard in there, well, Dame time is the fourth quarter. Dame time is when you need him, and that pick and roll with them basically puts defenses in a bind, because with the size advantage the Mavs have because of the injuries, you were switching a small onto Giannis in that pick and roll game, and it was advantage basketball. If he would just pound that guy down low, if you set two, hop it out to somebody like A.J. Green or Kevin Porter Jr. or Gary Trent for some threes, and it just made it too hard to get the stops you needed to get. This is why they made it, to make their offense easier, and they were able to take the hit on the defensive side.
Such a professional scorer is Damian Lillard when you watch him and you see him and all that he has. You guys called it a deep, deep bag. And he really can bring so much, such an arsenal of weapons. And he was perfect at the free throw line too, 8 for 8. He had 6 rebounds and 6 assists too. And it really looked so effortless along the way. And really they just threw such a knockout punch. They scored 70 points between the second and third quarter, outscoring the Mavericks by 27. And at that point, with such a deep and talented team that's healthy, that's what Doc Rivers said before the game. We're healthy right now, and we are going to be able to score and score at will. We got a ton of scorers, and that's just it. it's really hard to slow them down. And they didn't even have a great 3-point shooting night like they're used to. And the rebounding is where you look and really see the size disadvantage show itself so much. You're happy that the Mavericks were able to win the paint points. And so much of that credit goes to a guy like Moses Brown, who had another really nice game. You're so happy for him and the way he's come through this 10-day contract and been able to show what he can do.
Yeah, and I think at times it looks like, I mean, we've talked about this. The Mavericks are playing hard. They haven't stopped playing hard. But I think in these last few games, I think you especially saw it in the second quarter tonight, and in the way that they began the third quarter, there's a heavy burden, and so they got to figure out a way to create sparks. That spark wasn't there tonight. I felt like early on, because those shots were going in and out for Milwaukee, it kind of pumped some life into them. But when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, everything is a very heavy lift right now. They got to figure out a way to create some spark.
Yeah, this team is built, when fully healthy, to be such a basically wall-off paint defensively, live on that side, and then score enough on the offensive end with Kyrie getting some opportunities. But defense is just keying on him. So he's 9 of 23 because he's having to work so hard and getting multiple long defenders looking at him to get his shot. And so it's difficult for him, and the others are basically having to step up and play way above the level they're used to playing at. Moses Brown goes 18 and 9 tonight. And listen, this is his last game as a Maverick. He's going to get picked up by somebody else because of what he's shown here. And the reason he can't be a two-way player, he's just been in the league too long. So if you're wondering why the Mavericks can't just go do that, that's why. I do think, though, that even though you're hard capped, the league's got to look at situations like this where you sign 10-day players. You want people to have jobs that fit in somewhere well. There's got to be some carve-outs in situations like this, especially with so many injuries the Mavs have been dealing with, to be able to keep a player like that in a job and in a position where he can be effective, because, frankly, the Mavs would keep him if they could financially.
Well, and it feels like par for the course this season, that they have a big who is producing and is a big part of things and fits well. And for whatever reason now, this is not injury. This is contracts. This is financial. This is those limitations now rearing their ugly head. And unfortunately, it's just the latest and a frustrating sort of stretch of situations for Mavericks centers or Mavericks bigs. And they will have to say goodbye, unfortunately.
And the other thing, too, is, P.J. Washington Jr. left the game and didn't come back. And, he's been hurt a lot during this stretch that we're talking about, but he's one of your bigs right now. Like, when you look at it, they're going to reevaluate their three bigs on Thursday, not bring them back. They're going to reevaluate them. And so it is going to be like this for several weeks. And so that's why, knowing that this is Moses' last game for the Mavs, and I don't know what those expectations are for PJ, but if you look at the way he played in the Laker game when he really struggled and then missing the game and then only playing a little bit tonight, I mean, they got a tough game against Sacramento coming up on Monday, and I don't know what that big roster is going to be. And you're sitting there going, I know Sabonis got hurt tonight, but Valanciunas is a big old boy. Yeah. I mean, it just doesn't stop in the league.
And it doesn't seem like PJ is right now.
Absolutely not.
And if they had the luxury of giving him time probably to get right, I'm sure they'd like to. That is not something they have had all season long.
He really wants to get out there and play, and you just wonder whether he just needs a little bit of time to get that right, because he was supposed to play 20 to 30 minutes. He played 15.
Right.
Yeah.
That obviously means something wasn't right.
Well, and my only hope, and I'm trying to look on the bright side of this, is the game was starting to get out of hand pretty quickly. And if they're thinking, let's just sit him, this game is probably not likely to be won here, a big comeback. And so hopefully it's leaning more towards that than it is that he isn't, feeling well and able to come back.
His shot is so flat and short right now. That's lift. I mean, it's very short and right.
Yeah.
And so he's having a hard time gathering himself to get the lift on those shots, and that's an indication of what's going down there in those ankles.
All right, more coming up here on the post-game edition of Mavs Center Court. Moses Brown has certainly been a bright spot, an 18 and 9 rebound game. More on the way. We'll hear from Jason Kidd as well coming up.